Drag Me to Hell. What can I say about this movie other than what the f? If I hear one more person say that something is living rent-free in their head, I'm gonna commit seppuku with a rusty soldering iron. But last Halloween, my girlfriend and I sat down and watched Drag Me to Hell, and let me just say that it's been living in my head ever since. And it hasn't paid a dime. We thought this was gonna be a horror movie, but we couldn't have been more wrong. As soon as the movie started and I saw Sam Raimi's name appear, I was like, oh, that's Sam Raimi? The same guy who gave us this masterpiece? After a little bit of research, it turns out that Sam actually has a history of working in the horror movie industry. And call me an idiot, but I had no idea that the guy who gave us the OG Spider-Man movies actually also gave us the Evil Dead franchise, and he actually worked on every single American Grudge movie. Wow. You know, come to think of it, it actually does make a lot of sense when I think back to certain scenes from the Spider-Man movies. Yikes. Drag Me to Hell was written by Sam Raimi and his brother Ivan right before Sam worked on the Spider-Man trilogy. It had a budget of $30 million and actually made $90 million in the box office. Yeah, this movie made 3 times the amount of money they had in the budget. This movie actually got pretty good ratings with a 6.5 out of 10 on IMDb and a 92% on Rotten Tomatoes. Am I like the only person that watched this not knowing that it was supposed to be a comedy? Because there's really no indication that this is a horror comedy until you actually watch the movie. From the box art to the title of the movie. The movie opens up in Pasadena, California to a Hispanic family conducting an exorcism on their son Juan. The boy stole a necklace from a gypsy's wagon, and then a demon shows up and starts beating the crap out of the entire family, and then Juan gets dragged to hell. The woman who conducted the exorcism then swears that she'll one day face the demon again. There's this whole thing in the movie with flies, and it's really weird, but basically, from what I understand, anytime you see a fly on screen, it basically means that death is nearby or danger is present. We're then introduced to the main character of the movie, Christine, who's stuck in traffic and listening to a very strange audiobook about how to speak English or something.
Bound when the mouth is round. Round. Round.
She works at a bank and is competing with her coworker Stu for the assistant manager position. This first scene at the bank has some really weird, corny dialogue, and it immediately makes you suspicious if you're actually watching a horror movie or a comedy. The Sam Raimi charm is immediately present at this point.
And maybe on your way back, you could pick me up a turkey club?
Turkey club, excellent choice. You mind picking one up for me? Thanks. And spicy mustard. What you got? Your approval on this?
In the next scene, we're introduced to Christine's boyfriend, Clayton, played by Justin Long. And I have to say, he actually does a really good job in this movie. His acting is really good. Clayton collects rare coins, and I guess he likes to keep them in envelopes, and this will actually become a big plot driver later in the movie. We find out that Clayton's parents don't approve of his relationship with Christine, who at this point he's been dating for almost a year. In the following scene, an old gypsy woman named Miss Ganoush comes into the bank and starts asking Christine for an extension on her mortgage. We find out that this is the 3rd extension she's requested, and because Christine is trying to win favor with her boss, Mr. Jackson, and get the assistant manager position, she decides to turn down the old woman's request for the extension. The old gypsy woman starts acting insane and gets on her knees and starts begging Christine, and then she like freaks out and loses her mind and starts attacking Christine, and she has to get carried out by security.
Mrs. Ganesh.
This entire scene goes from being completely disgusting to just completely absurd and completely off the wall. It just totally catches you off guard. Needless to say, this skyrockets Christine towards the position she wants. After work, Christine gets in her car and she sees the old woman's phlegm napkin floating around in the parking garage. Then the camera cuts and we see Miss Ganoush in the back seat of her car. This leads to an absolutely absurd scene where they get in this ridiculous fight. I can't even put into words how ludicrous this scene is. Without exaggerating, it's honestly one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen in a movie. At this point, I can't even believe what I'm watching. I'm just completely dumbfounded by this scene, and frankly, I have no words. Well, anyway, it speaks for itself. The old woman pulls a button off Christine's sleeve and puts a curse on it, and then immediately we see a fly buzzing around Christine. Going back to what I said before about the flies, my theory is that flies typically buzz around dead bodies, and as soon as Christine was cursed, it's as though she was already dead. While walking down the street with her boyfriend Justin Long, Christine decides to go see a fortune teller, and again the acting is very corny in this scene. Christine is then told by the fortune teller that there's been a curse put on her. When she goes home, she starts to experience the curse, and a lot of these shots are very Sam Raimi-esque, with the quick camera zooms and the absurd puppetry and all the objects moving around and the exaggerated physics. It's all just very goofy and corny and funny. When Justin Long shows up, they both decide that it was just some kind of PTSD that she experienced from being attacked earlier that day, and then they both write it off and they go to sleep. And then while asleep, there's this horrifying, disgusting scene where a fly like crawls into her nose and into her mouth. Ugh, it's so cringe. And also, why would they sleep with those windows behind them like that? Gosh. And then there's another jump scare where she lays down and it's the old woman laying next to her. All the gross out stuff in this movie is incredibly slapstick, like you're watching a skit from Saturday Night Live. It's just so over the top and absurd and ridiculous. I know I keep saying this, but the scene where she starts yelling at her coworkers and then she has that bloody nose is just, it's one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen. I can't put in words how absurd this is.
Oh no, I've got it under control.
What is with you?
Mr. Jack.
Did I get any in my mouth?
Oh my God.
Did I get any in my mouth?
Let me take you over here.
At this point, you cannot deny that you're watching a comedy film. So eventually she decides to apologize to the old gypsy woman, so she uses bank records to find out where she lives. When she arrives at the old gypsy woman's house, the granddaughter opens the door, and somehow she knows that Christine used to be fat. When the granddaughter lets Christine inside the house, we find out that the old gypsy woman actually died and that they were at the funeral. This next part is so gross. I don't even really know how to describe it. It's like you're watching a slapstick comedy routine. It's just pure unadulterated gross out humor. It's so weird too how after the corpse pukes in Christina's mouth, she gets up and she's just got nothing on her at all. She's totally fine. It's like she was unaffected by the whole thing. When Christine realizes that the old gypsy woman is dead, she goes back to the fortune teller, who suggests that she sacrifice a small animal to appease the demon, which he tells her is called the Lamia. When Christine returns home, she's attacked by the Lamia, who launches her into an armoire, and somehow she's totally fine and doesn't have like 13 broken bones. She then decides to sacrifice her little kitten to appease the Lamia. When Justin Long shows up and sees the blood on her shirt, she says it was tomato juice, which is like such a ridiculous excuse. In the next scene, Christine goes to meet her boyfriend's parents for the first time at dinner, and as soon as she goes into their house, we get the sense that they're both complete douchebags. Clayton refers to his father as Sir, which I find really funny for some reason. This entire next scene has to be just a giant comedy skit. There's no way you could possibly take any of this seriously at all. It's all very awkward and strange, and in this scene, Christine realizes that she didn't really get rid of the curse by sacrificing her kitten. The practical effects in this scene are hilarious with the cake. I don't know if it's CGI or practical effects or a combination of the two, but when she coughs up the fly and like the camera like zooms up on the cake is hilarious.
Oh my God!
When Christine returns to the fortune teller for the third time, he tells her that if she can make up $10,000, he can take her to see an exorcist and have the demon removed. Which doesn't sound like a scam at all. Then while at work, Christine is told by her boss that the McPherson deal, the deal she was working on, was canceled and that he's going to give the assistant manager position to Stu. Which is really bad news for Christine since she needs $10,000 to go get an exorcism. So she starts pawning off everything she owns. And then while she's in her backyard looking for things to sell, she's attacked by the demon again. The absurdity and hilarity just continues in this scene with some really bad CGI. After she's not able to make up the money she needs, Justin Long shows up and gives her the $10K to go on the trip to get an exorcism. It turns out that the person conducting the exorcism is of course the woman from the beginning of the movie. The entire exorcism scene has a very like Disney Hollywood Studios vibe to it, like we're in the Tower of Terror or something. The setting of this scene and all of the things that happen give me sort of like a haunted mansion vibe. The woman conducting the exorcism on Christine tells her that they're going to lure the Lamia out and have him go into a goat, and then they're going to sacrifice the goat to get rid of the Lamia for good. However, after summoning the Lamia and putting him into the goat, the plan completely fails and the goat escapes and starts talking, and it's so ridiculous.
No! You tricked me, you black-hearted whore!
No, Milos, no!
You bitch!
And then the Lamia leaves the goat and goes into the assistant exorcist, Milos, and he starts dancing around like he's a marionette puppet, like he's Pinocchio or something. And the first time I saw this, I literally burst out laughing. It's literally the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen.
I don't want your cat, you dirty pork queen!
Anyway, the entire exorcism gets completely botched and is a total failure. The fortune teller tells Christine that she still has one option left. She can give the cursed button as a gift to someone else, and in turn take the curse away from her.
Geez, you know, that information might have been a little more useful to me yesterday.
But now Christine is faced with a moral conflict. Does she keep the curse, or does she give it to another innocent person? Christine learns that her coworker Stu had been doing some insider trading at the company, so she uses this information to blackmail him into giving him the button. But then she feels too guilty to give him the button, so she refuses to do it. And this will be a little bit of foreshadowing here, but she should have gave him the freaking button. Just the mere fact that she didn't give him the button should have been enough for her to be absolved of the curse. But what I find even more amazing is that she wasn't willing to give the button to Stu, but she considered giving it to some innocent old man. The fortune teller then tells Christine that there's nothing stopping her from giving the button to Miss Ganoush even though she's already dead.
Once again, things that could have been brought to my attention yesterday!
So Christine decides to drive to the graveyard to return the button to Miss Ganoush, but is stopped on the way there by the handkerchief, which attacks her while she's in the middle of driving down the road. Christine digs up the old gypsy woman and shoves the button in her mouth.
Choke on it, bitch!
And then it starts raining and the grave fills with water, and there's this ridiculous scene where she basically gets in a fight with the corpse. It's completely comical and absurd. So now the curse is finally over and Christine can move on with her life. So to celebrate, she decides to go on a trip with her boyfriend Clayton. But when she arrives at the train station, Clayton shows up and hands her the envelope with the button. And we find out that she accidentally swapped the cursed button with the coin she gave Clayton at the beginning of the movie. Remember how he put it in an envelope? That was all just so they could do this twist ending. And she freaks out and falls in front of the train and gets dragged to hell. My first impression after seeing the end of the movie was, really? Like, did she really deserve that? Did she really deserve to go to hell after everything she went through? After having enough decency not to give the curse off to someone else? In a later interview, Sam Raimi actually said that she did deserve to go to hell.
She starts to lie and cheat. Eventually she becomes an animal killer, and she starts to do anything it takes to survive and save her own soul.
Sam, What are you talking about? She's like such a sweet person, and everything that happens to her is completely understandable. Everything she does is understandable. She's not a bad person. It's hard to see how she really deserved to go to hell. This movie is very disturbing at times and incredibly hilarious at times. The combination of the two is not something that you see very often, and I really appreciate it. I'd really love to see more movies that combine comedy and horror together. It's actually an incredibly good combination that you just don't see enough. Anyway, this movie is a blast. If you haven't seen it, I highly suggest you go watch it. It's really funny, and it's actually pretty scary. If you like this video, please check out my second channel that I just created with my best friend. It's called Sid and Diz. On that channel, we're going to watch really funny movies and just talk about them, and it'll be a good time. I think you'd enjoy it. If you'd like to see more content from me and be notified, please like and subscribe and hit that bell button. I've got a lot of videos planned that I think you'll really enjoy. Thanks a lot. Later.
Big boy, you gotta shoot it with 2 hands. Couple John Doe come through like who's man's. Blue ball, nah, she blew it like 2 grams. Everyone I lose abused a few hands.
Maybe on your way back, you could pick me up at Turkey Club.